everywhere, man, looking for someone.
Hello and welcome back! Or, if it's your first time, welcome! Thanks for being here! Today is about something that I'm already regretting. What is that? Redoing this video. The problem really isn't redoing it, because I can talk. That's not the problem. The problem is revisiting a book I'm done with. Like, I just don't want to get back into. But I wasn't satisfied with the first one I did, and I just wanted to make sure that your time was used well, instead of you walking away saying, wow, that was a waste of my X number of minutes. The book is Girl Last Seen by Laurin. This book has been on my TBR for many a moon, and obviously since it's not an audiobook, it was going to take me a while to get to. I'm glad I knocked it out because I'd been wanting to read it. I'm not glad I knocked it out because I didn't enjoy it. I was drawn to this book because I was a huge fan of Carolyn B. Cooney's The Face on the Milk Carton, which, yes, I know that dates me, but what are you gonna do? We all age. The Face on the Milk Carton is about a teenage girl who sees her face on a milk carton, and she goes about trying to figure out how that happened. I thought maybe this would be like that, and in some respects it is, because it's about a young woman who had been abducted when she was a child and then escaped captivity. But that's where the similarities end. Girl Last Seen is a book that is a book according to taste, according to reading preferences. There are some books that I read that I don't think anybody should ever read because they're really terrible. This one, it's just really gritty, and I could not find a character to connect with. I could not connect with the main character, Lainey, and that's a huge issue for me. Bad things can happen, and I'm okay with that because that's part of life. But if characters make bad choices and don't do things to help themselves out, and it's incredibly dark and I don't understand motivations, I just can't get on board with it. Part of my problem could be that I don't understand the psychology behind abduction victims. So I would love to hear what you have to say, if you have any more insight into really like what a person goes through in the aftermath about kind of picking themselves back up and putting the pieces together and continuing on with their lives. Because really, Lainey, all right, so the book opens with her having been released and picked up by cops, and we learn very quickly she has become pregnant by her abductor. That's traumatizing. Being held in captivity and tortured and raped and whatever else she endured, that's traumatizing enough. But then having to live with your abductor's baby, for someone so young, of course I can see why she would have a really hard time putting herself back together. But I don't understand why 10 years down the road she has still done absolutely nothing with her life. She blames a lot of it on everybody else, and I feel like that is one of her other issues, or one of my other issues with her. She cannot accept responsibility for anything. Everything is always somebody else's fault. Her case has gone unsolved because she's not worth their time, because she's poor, because she's Latina. Her not keeping her baby, that was not her fault either. Like, she wasn't given a choice. Her job's like, well, that's all I can do. I'm like, no. I mean, we really don't know what happens after she gives birth. She does receive some kind of medical care, although she says, well, I didn't get what probably I should have had because XYZ. So I don't know if it's maybe she did not get the proper mental health care, and that stunted her ability to move on and to do better for herself. Let's get into the book. So Lainey arrives at work and she sees a new missing poster. And she has, I don't blame her, gotten into this habit of collecting missing posters. But this one is special because she automatically knows that this young girl, Olivia Shaw, has been abducted by the same person who had taken her. we soon learn, and this is not a spoiler because we get this very, very soon into the book, that Olivia is actually her biological daughter. She sees the missing poster. She takes the missing poster. I think what she does is she goes out and gets drunk and maybe takes some pills or gets high, or she's on something. And she basically gets fired from work. So then she goes to her second job, which is at a strip club. She is not one of the dancers. She is a barkeep, but there she encounters one of the police officers who had picked her up after she'd been released. His name is Sean, and she had developed an infatuation with him. She had never seen him again after that night, but, I guess we all like who we like, and someone in her mental state, he is a hero, and so she is going to fixate on him. Anyways, so she has not seen him in 10 years. She does run from him. I don't quite know why, because her mental state is questionable throughout this whole book. I guess she thinks that they suspect her, even though she has had nothing to do with Olivia in 10 years. Anyways, she assumes that they suspect her of being part of this kidnapping. So she runs from him. He catches her. He convinces her, well, not even convinces her. She agrees to come to the station, basically to give her story again, to kind of say, well, this is where I was. This is how I could not be involved with this. And this is a question that I have again. So she has trust issues, obviously. So she agrees to come to the station, and you would assume he would be the one handling her because he's kind of the one who has ties to her case. But he's not there when she gets to the station. And she's talking to some other police officer or a detective who she feels doesn't respect her at all. And so she storms off and she runs into Sean and blah-de-blah-de-blah. She then allows him to take her to the adoptive parents, Tom and Jacqueline. And Jacqueline convinces her to kind of come with them and be a united front in trying to get Olivia to be returned. I just can't. Like, I do not understand anything. Her whole life is about escape now, and all she wants to do is get high and get so drunk that she doesn't have to deal with reality. So that's kind of just what she does. Every step she takes, she's on something. And that just makes it really hard to understand her motives. So she does this, and she makes a fool of herself, and then she returns home to find that somebody had broken into her crappy apartment. She, instead of calling Sean, she just goes to a coworker's house, who then tries to initiate, I guess, sex with her. So, female on female. And it's like, it's not that she doesn't want it, but she's just in no state to participate. So it's not like she really says no because she doesn't want it. She just says no because she's like, what are you doing? And, you just gave me pills and now I'm high out of my mind. And then she steals one of the shirts because she hadn't brought anything with her. And she just does a lot of questionable things. Of course, and this coworker later on goes on to defame her, and he's like, she would steal my stuff and use my perfume and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, why is all of this necessary? I guess does not trust the police to do their job, so she figures out ways to do it for herself. But she's like, high the entire time. So Sean, after learning about the break-in at her apartment, and then she has this car accident, he takes her to a motel so that she can be somewhere safe. And she just keeps leaving this place and doing questionable things. And it's like, I just don't understand why. It's like, can't you just sit and wait for him? Part of her backstory is that she cannot remember how she got abducted, how she got into that situation, and then she really knows nothing about her captivity. So she's no help to the police whatsoever, but she still thinks that she can figure out who took Olivia. Her mother is kind of a non-entity in her life, and we are led to believe her mother had, gone to jail before, during, shortly after her captivity for drugs, I guess. And I don't know if that's true, if that's not true, if that was just a ruse because she was going to start a new life. Lainey tracks down phone numbers for some reason, there's this one phone number that she believes is gonna give her answers. Because she'd initially assumed that Olivia's school teacher had been the culprit, and then that turned out to be a no-go. And so I guess she then, for some reason, latches on to this other unknown number. And okay, you know what really bothers me in books is when they never charge their phones. And then they're like, oh, well, my phone is always on low battery or it's always dead. I'm like, well, take your charger with you. Or why don't you ever eat but you're hungry? Or why don't you sleep when you're exhausted? I hate that. I really do. And that's kind of her whole existence, is never doing what she should to take care of herself, never having what she needs to accomplish anything. So she tracks down the owner of this phone number only to discover she doesn't actually find her mother there, but it's her mother's new home with her mother's new husband and her mother's new children. And he's like, oh, I thought you knew. And I'm like, why is any of this relevant? And somehow she tracks down her mother. It's revealed that her mother, granted, remember, Lainey had been 10 when she was abducted. Her mother thought Lainey needed to start earning her keep. So she drugged her, and I guess sold her, gave her to her abductor. And it was supposed to be temporary and turned into 3 years. Again, I don't understand. This book was, for me, it was a really heavy read. Like, do you ever read something that physically weighs on you? You know, you just feel this pressure in your head, and you can't think clearly, you can't grasp or catch on to what's being said. That's how I felt this entire read. So I'm sure Laurin was very clear with getting across this point, but I couldn't grasp it. Whatever the case, the mother is at fault for the abduction. Like, she gave her daughter to a man who never gave her back. And then the mother goes and kills herself. Like, they get into a physical brawl. She knocks Lainey out, or not even knocks her out, but she kind of incapacitates her, runs away and kills herself. I don't understand that. And I just kind of feel like it was an unnecessary part of the novel. Yes, it explains how Lainey was abducted, got into that situation, but I thought that could have been achieved in another manner. Then, oh my gosh, this book, I just don't get it. She runs out of pills. You know, she's all about uppers and downers, just anything that can get her mind out of reality. And she has no money because she's been fired from both of her low-paying jobs. And so she's like, well, I'm just going to call my dealer, and I know he's always wanted to sleep with me, so I'm going to sleep with him. Which reminds me, so I told you about Sean. And she had not seen him in 10 years. Then he comes back into her life, and he's trying to help her, trying to take care of her. But she has continued this infatuation with him. And then one day he shows up at her motel room, and they sleep together. And I'm just like, why? I can understand her having this unnatural fascination with him. And okay, sure, she's of age, but he's in his 40s. What is it about her that makes him want to sleep with her? I mean, she's a train wreck, and she cannot do a single thing that he tells her to do, but he sleeps with her? Even physically, she's essentially emaciated. She's unhealthy because she can't take care of herself, and then she's always on drugs, so she never eats healthy. So it's like, what about her is attractive to him? It just grossed me out. And then, of course, as soon as she sleeps with him, she can't get away from him fast enough. Anyways, back to the drug dealer. She's like, I know you've always wanted to sleep with me. As long as you give me drugs, let's do it. I just don't care for this part of the book. But she ends up overdosing, and she goes to the hospital, and then it's kind of like, oh, woe is me. What is going on with my life? I just need to escape. So she jets out of the hospital, and she receives a call from Olivia's mother, and she's like, you know, let me come get you. Instead of Jacqueline, it's Tom. If you don't see where this is going, you need to get yourself together. Turns out, big spoiler, Tom abducted Lainey, and he had been molesting Olivia. Jacqueline had secreted Olivia away. So this whole time, Olivia has been safe. But Tom thinks that Lainey knows something, which she doesn't, because she is high as a kite 99% of the time. Sorry, I took a break. I've got a friend. This is my sister's dog, Bogart. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. He really hates coming to the basement, so it's actually a really big surprise. A big treat. Such a good boy. Back to very last scene. Tom has used Jacqueline to lure Lainey back to him, and he brings her back to one of their other homes, because they're very wealthy. So he brings her there, and he intends to torture information out of her, because for some reason, he thinks she has some. Bye, bogeys. But he's convinced she knows something, which goes nowhere fast, and she is able to incapacitate him and then ultimately kill him. Turns out, like I said, Olivia's fine. And then Jacqueline, I don't know why, but she decides she's gonna take care of Lainey forever. She's gonna give Lainey the life that Lainey never had. We come back to Lainey, and she's in this really nice hospital room, and Jacqueline is willing to provide for her. The end. And I guess we're kind of left on this note that maybe Lainey is going to form a relationship with Olivia. It's kind of a happily ever after, and I'm fine with the ending. You know, I'm glad that Tom got his just rewards. I didn't care for the writing. I didn't care for the style. I didn't care for the darkness. I didn't care that we have a main character who does nothing for herself. She makes all the wrong moves. And that sounds bad, because I know that people are not perfect. And I'm okay with having a character who has to work for it, who will make mistakes and do things the wrong way. But I felt like all of Lainey's moves were unnecessary. Like, she didn't think any of them through. That's the problem. You know, you read some books, like, I actually can't remember if this is part of the book or just part of the movie, but in that last Harry Potter movie where they have to get back to Hogwarts, and Hermione is like, but we don't have a plan, and you know, Harry and Ron are like, well, when have our plans ever worked? Sometimes your plans aren't going to go well, but sometimes you don't need a plan, but like, she just does. She just does things without thinking, and I don't understand how that's moving the plot forward to get zero information. Like, when she calls Jacqueline's sister, she had gone to the Shaws, again, like, I still don't understand why she went to the Shaws. She was kind of in trouble with stuff. Like, she had nobody to turn to. So she goes to them, and then they are no help to her whatsoever. They go into another room to argue, and she kind of goes into Jacqueline's purse to steal stuff, but doesn't find anything, but does come across the sister's phone number. So she's like, well, maybe I think the sister knows more than she's saying. So maybe I'm going to call the sister and get her to meet up with me. It's like the birth mother card gives her total access. And that really annoys me, because, again, it just makes things too easy. She meets up with the sister and gets nowhere. The sister just shuts her down. So I'm like, was the whole point of that to eliminate the sister as a suspect? Because the sister was somebody who would pick Olivia up from school, and so she possibly could have been involved in whatever happened. I like to have a purpose, and I didn't feel like a lot of what Lainey did had a purpose. It was, I guess, junkie choices. You know, things that a junkie would do because they don't think clearly. One of my biggest pet peeves from this book is that there was no indication that Tom was the culprit. It's like pulling a rabbit out of the hat and just saying, hey, this person who had little to no role is the bad guy. I like to have hints. He was pretty standoffish the entire book, but he had little to no interaction with Lainey. He was the opposite of Jacqueline. Jacqueline thought Lainey could solve everything, whereas Tom acted like, why do we have this junky good-for-nothing in our home? There was no indication whatsoever that Tom could have anything to do with any of it. And that's just disappointing for me, because I have a mind, like if you are handing me a book that says, this book is about a girl who'd been captured, and then 10 years later, somebody else was captured by the same culprit. I'm thinking, well, this is a mystery novel. This is something I'm going to walk through trying to figure it out along with the protagonist, along with the main character. But I don't get any of that. Like, we got no clues. We went to Olivia's old school because she had been kicked out because she'd been molested, so she was kind of acting out. So we go to that school to figure out why she'd been kicked out, and then that's kind of where we get on the, oh, it was the school teacher's fault because she had done something inappropriate to him. Other than that, Sean says he's working on it, but I feel like all he does is try to not succumb to the urge to smoke, sleep with Lainey, and try to get her to stop being irrational. So what is he doing? And then Lainey, she just chases rabbits the whole time while she's high. There really was no... this book just gives me a headache, which is why I hate having to revisit it. The premise is something that I could get behind, but the execution, I would have preferred she went a different route. I would have preferred Lainey to be someone that was damaged, but really was trying to do better for herself, that she actually cared about Olivia. She could still have conflicting emotions concerning this child, but I would have preferred that she wasn't so self-centered. I really feel like all of her actions were just self-serving, just about getting justice for herself. And that bothered me too, that the assumption that her case was never solved because of her color and her station in life. She wants to get justice for herself because nobody else will do it for her, and she's completely unequipped to do it. She has scars on her ankles and her hands, and so she always wears these massive boots. So she just happened, when Tom recaptured her, to have a switchblade in one of her boots and a cell phone in the other. I mean, that's just too easy. Too easy. Like, she required no skill to get through this book. No mental faculties to get through this book. All she had to do was use money on a credit card she'd maxed out to do a reverse phone search and drive her crappy car places. And, figure out how to get her drugs. That's really all she was capable of doing. That's all she had to do. And that was the book. I'm sorry if any of you don't like this video still, but I can't get into this book again. I'm so ready to get it back to the library. I might actually have fines on it. As much as I don't want to have this book, you'd think I would have already given it back. Please come back! Don't let this one ruin your opinion of me. See you later! Bye!